This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness 1, and welcome to the Thursday Mobileton. This is Thursday, March 5, 2020, and another day that Field McConnell is in jail. We are a little less than 24 hours from learning if there has been a bond reduction in the case of Field McConnell, and what else may come out of the hearing tomorrow morning on the 6th of March. Now, one thing is abundantly clear, and that is that there's not going to be any dismissal of charges, although a motion to that effect may be filed. That's par for the course in these things, but I doubt it, and it may not even be to tomorrow. But at some point, a few motions are going to be made. And now the primary purpose of the hearing tomorrow is to go over how things are going to proceed in the main trial in May. They get into such things as what evidence is going to be used, what motions may be put forth, and so on and so forth. It's not a uniform process. There's usually little things that are different in each one of these conferences, but it will be along those lines. And I would suspect that the bond amount and conditions for release will be announced tomorrow, and whether or not Field McConnell is going to be able to post a bond, or someone else is going to do it on his behalf. Now, there's speculation that the son is going to be the one that's going to be footing the bill for all this, and thus, now that the bond has been reduced, he can better afford it. Now, there's not a whole heck of a lot going on with Field McConnell in that sense, other than we have what we might call the Canadian-American War going on. The little dispute is continuing between Timothy Charles Homseth and Agent Margaritaville. And more details keep coming out. And the one detail that has come out is that Agent Margaritaville is the one who created the Children's Crusade concept. And that Field McConnell basically took the format, made the Children's Crusade his own, and Agent Margaritaville went on to create the Children's Army. And what's striking about these two organizations is how similar the trademarks are, roughly in shape and the way they're worded. There's differences, of course, but they're subtle. You would almost think that both were the same organization, or what have you. As it turns out, that's partially true, since it is claimed that Agent Margaritaville created the original Children's Crusade. Now, what is not exactly clear is if there were donations being collected while Agent Margaritaville had control over the Children's Crusade. But what is important now is what is the state of affairs of the Children's Crusade under Abel Danger and now Field McConnell. Because that's going to come into play if investigators are inclined to investigate it. Now, Timothy Homseth has been accused by Agent Margaritaville of not being forthcoming about where the funds are going with the Children's Crusade and, by extension, with the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. Timothy Homseth is engaged in a rather bizarre series of evasions and dodgings and not directly answering the questions of Agent Margaritaville. He has made outrageous accusations against Agent Margaritaville, and some rather interesting ones, but we'll get into that in a moment. But the important thing here is that Timothy Charles Homseth refuses to account in specific detail about the funds being paid into the Children's Crusade and, by extension, the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. At one point, there was a GoFundMe page where Timothy Homseth made direct appeals for donations, and yet Timothy Homseth deflects from that, ignores it completely, and berates Agent Margaritaville in the process. Now, there are laws in place that regardless of what kind of organization the Children's Crusade is, they are obligated under various laws in the United States and possibly other countries to keep accurate and detailed records of the financial transactions of these entities. Money taken in, money spent, and where the money is going. And who is benefiting from these funds? Are people being paid salaries or what? None of this has been done. There is absolutely no public information on funding by either of these two organizations. You cannot go anywhere online and find out the financial records of the Children's Crusade, nor can you find the financial records of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. The amount of information you get from PayPal and Patreon and all that are minimal at best. They show a certain amount of money towards the goal in one case, but if you were to pay with a Visa, MasterCard, or debit card, or even PayPal, those amounts are not going to be available to the public. And thus, that's how you can hide your activities from the public. You can't hide these activities from the government, and this is where Tim Homseth and anyone else tied to these organizations may be in trouble. Because if you are involved in any way with seeking funds, utilizing funds, distributing funds, and so on and so forth, you have to account for that. For any number of reasons. If you're doing it on behalf of an organization, you have to do the proper paperwork as it deals with that particular organization. If you're doing this as an individual, you have to account for it for tax purposes. Because funds derived from GoFundMe and these other entities may be subject to federal income tax and state income taxes in some cases. So these funds have to be accounted for. And they also have to be accounted for so that there is no problem with money laundering. And this is something that Tim Homseth apparently does not comprehend. Now, it doesn't matter that it's Agent Margaritaville that is asking for this information. Anyone in the public sector can ask for this accountability because it's public information. You are running a charity, so to speak. You are using the internet and resources such as GoFundMe and PayPal and the major credit card companies to collect funds. You are obligated under the law to report this information. And Timothy Holmseth refuses to provide this information, and Timothy Holmseth also refuses to provide the name of any individual responsible for the dispensation of these funds. Now, it has been said that Randy Q. Erickson might have something to do with the disbursement of funds of either one or both of these organizations, which means that she is accountable under the law to make public disclosures involving these funds. Now, since Timothy Charles Holmseth is the media spokesperson for the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force and did have an affiliation of sorts, regardless of his role, with the Children's Crusade, he has a responsibility to disclose this information, yet he refuses to do so. And thus, quite correctly, Agent Margaritaville has a right to call him out. Say, where's this money? Now, the side issue is that Agent Margaritaville claims to have a vast amount of information on people that may be involved in crimes against children. And Agent Margaritaville wants to provide this information to the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force through Tim Holmseth. Now, Tim Holmseth uses a rather odd excuse. He says that Agent Margaritaville and people affiliated with him want to frame him by having him come in possession of this material and then turn around and have him charged with possession of child pornography. And as someone who is supposed to be a media professional, award-winning journalist, and all this, Tim Holmseth realized that this is simply not true. And it's not true for this very reason. Timothy Charles Holmseth claims to be a member of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. He is the spokesperson for the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. He advertises it on his website, saying that he is third in line to the President of the United States. Now, this assertion carries with it a great deal of power and, most importantly, protection. Because if Timothy Charles Holmseth, acting on behalf of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, were to take possession of this material and immediately turn it over to the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, he would be protected, both by various whistleblower laws, by the way the law works, and by the fact that he is that close to the President of the United States. It's called transfer of custody. All Tim Holmseth would have to do is take possession of the material by mail, FedEx, keep the envelope in which the material came in sealed, and then turn the material over to the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. Or, since Timothy Charles Holmseth has publicly named who it is that is the intermediary between him and the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, that individual could either take possession of what Margaritaville is offering or make arrangements for that material to be turned over to the proper individual within the PPTF that could deal with the material. But Timothy Charles Holmseth refuses to do that. Instead, Timothy Charles Holmseth informs Agent Margaritaville that he should contact the FBI and possibly the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, since Margaritaville is a Canadian citizen. Now, I find this rather odd, for if this is what needs to be done with this material, what on earth is the purpose of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force? I was under the impression that the PPTF is supposed to be in the business of doing exactly what Margaritaville claims to have done, and that is to collect information on pedophiles and child traffickers and bring these people to justice. An organization this high up in the federal government, and with the kind of ties that Timothy Holmseth claims exist, should have the power to directly deal with the pedophiles. So I am not understanding why the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force cannot deal with this problem directly, and instead has to have the information passed off on to the FBI or William Barr at the Justice Department or some other law enforcement entity. This wipes out whatever argument that Tim Charles Holmseth has had about the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, which makes sense since the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force exists only in the feeble mind of Tim Holmseth and people stupid enough to be handling them in this situation. The PPTF simply does not exist. It never has, and it never will, because the Pentagon does not interact with the federal government in that manner. This is a civilian issue. It should be handled through civilian resources, such as the Justice Department, which already has a joint human trafficking task force. And it is a task force that neither Tim Holmseth, Phil McConnell, Randy Q, or anyone else in that group is affiliated with. This is all done through the Justice Department in cooperation with law enforcement agencies throughout the United States on a state and local level. So Tim Holmseth finds himself in a rather bad situation. Tim Holmseth cannot win this battle, so he deflects. He deflects by turning the tables on Agent Margaritaville and coming up with various accusations. The one main accusation he comes up with is that Agent Margaritaville has a criminal record. Well, guess what? So does Timothy Holmseth. And this is not only with the current warrant for his arrest for contempt of court for failure to appear. Tim Holmseth has convictions in his background. And I believe that some of these convictions are at the felony level. Timothy Holmseth has been charged with criminal trespass, with burglary. Now, what is a burglar? A burglar is a thief. Now, it has never been made clear, as far as I can tell, what led up to Timothy Charles Homseth being charged with a criminal trespass. Was he stealing something, or what was it he was doing trespassing on someone's property? Perhaps Timmy Homseth can explain it. He seems to be avoiding the issue. Other than the fact that Tim Homseth was a drunk that flaunted the law, we don't know much about certain facts of Tim Homseth's life that may explain this rather odd behavior he engages in. But that's for another day. Now, another thing that I found quite remarkable is that Tim Homseth is accusing Agent Margaritaville of barging into a criminal action. In this case, it is the upcoming trial of Field McConnell. Now, Agent Margaritaville sent to Field McConnell's attorney a letter suggesting that Field McConnell follow the advice of what was contained in that letter. And to some degree, it's common sense. Field McConnell should plead no contest, throw himself on the mercy of the courts, take a plea bargain, and try and mitigate the damage that's being done to him by this case. Agent Margaritaville realizes that Field McConnell did commit a crime. He did commit the crime for which he has been charged. He didn't argue about any ship being in dry dock or any of this other wacky stuff. He made a common sense argument that in his point of view, Field McConnell is guilty of the crime for which he's being charged, and he should take responsibility for it. And he laid out a detailed plan for the attorney to consider. Now, Tim Homseth hit back saying that Agent Margarita is not a lawyer and has no business getting involved in the case. Well, number one, Agent Margaritaville did not say he was a lawyer. He was writing on the behalf, as a friend, of Field McConnell, saying that I have known Field McConnell, we have a past with each other, I understand that he may have committed this crime, and this is my suggestion for Field McConnell, how he could get out of his situation. And since Field McConnell would have known Agent Margaritaville, he might be inclined to at least look at what Agent Margaritaville has suggested. Now, Tim Homseth has done the exact same thing. He, on the air, I don't know if he ever wrote a letter, suggested to Field McConnell go to his lawyer and have Agent Margaritaville and others investigated and their telephone records be subpoenaed. So Tim Homseth has done pretty much the same thing that Agent Margaritaville has. He has given Field McConnell, either directly or through an attorney, legal advice. And he's done the same thing with Denise McConnell. He has barged into that situation, saying that the people representing Denise McConnell have no business doing so. And his handler, Randy Q. Erickson, has said the same thing. So, this is Timothy Charles Homseth once again being a hypocrite. And speaking of barging in to things, Timothy Charles Homseth seems to forget that this is what created this whole situation in the first place between him and Field McConnell. Because 10 years ago, it was Timothy Charles Homseth that barged in on a high-profile missing child case, and that is the case of Haley Cummings. Timothy Charles Homseth barged into the case by contacting Kim Picasio and her associates first. Came up with some bizarre chart or explanation for what happened to Hallie Cummings. And when he got hit with a thanks but no thanks, he immediately attacked Kim Picasio and anyone associated with her. Everybody became a suspect. Hallie Cummings was either alive or dead or sold or something. And then he somehow decided to bring the case of Casey Anthony and missing Hallie Anthony in on the case. Caylee Anthony, excuse me. And so Tim Homseth barged into that case. Tim Homseth is barged into the Weatherling case. Tim Homseth is barged into the John Bonanza Ramsey case and other cases. And yet he gets on his little Facebook channel and screams bloody murder because Agent Margaritaville sent one letter to Phil McConnell's attorney. I find that rather hypocritical for those reasons. You know, this is a problem with Tim Homseth, and it's also a problem with the people that support him, is they ignore Tim Homseth's actions when Tim Homseth criticizes other people for doing precisely the same thing that he is guilty of. Tim Homseth is the ultimate hypocrite. And Tim Homseth is going to continue to resist any accountability for his actions, any accountability for even 1 penny of the funds that were sought. Nothing has ever come out about these Navy SEALs that were supposed to protect Tim Homseth from the President Pence assassination attempt, or the assassination attempts that were supposed to be done by just about anyone you could think of. You know, officials in the state of Minnesota, be they Sheriff's Department, State Police, DEA, whoever. All these people that were after this unemployed pizza delivery driver, running around in his ancient car with a bad transmission that someone besides Tim Homseth paid for to get fixed, in the open, knocking on doors, delivering pizzas with absolutely no protection. Was not in a safe house, was not under armed guard. He was out delivering pizzas. You know, it'd be kind of hard for the Navy SEALs to protect someone under those circumstances. But it was absolute fiction anyway. But the problem is that the followers of Tim Homseth, and by extension Phil McConnell, do not use common sense. They just blindly believe these people. Mainly for political reasons, mainly because Phil McConnell does Bible readings. And if it's one thing that'll get a believer to support your cause, it's the Holy Bible. It's their ultimate weapon. Because you can't fight the Bible. So these people use the Bible to advocate their positions. They use the Holy Bible to hold over the head of people and say, look, we're godly people. We have this Bible. We believe in the Almighty, and we're appointed by God to do all this stuff. And people just, you know, dig into their purses and their wallets, pull out the plastic man, pull out the cash, and send it their way. And they laugh, quite literally, all the way to the bank. You know, common sense does not tell people that a man who cannot pay $141,000 in federal income tax and pay the taxes on his house and provide homeowners insurance and so on and so forth is not going to be able to raise money to engage in fighting human trafficking and pedophilia, and certainly is not going to be able to buy a dude ranch in Texas. You know, people just don't seem to understand these things. And they don't understand how some guy running around the country in an SUV with one or more women doing who knows what is going to do anything to save any children. Because all Tim Homestead does is yell at people who are attempting to get to the truth, who are attempting to find out where the hell all this money is going and what is the true purpose of the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force and the Children's Crusade. Now, Phil McConnell, in his infinite wisdom, has stated quite clearly that the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force does not exist. And Tim Homestead is trying desperately to get people to forget about that. To declare that it exists, but it's kind of different, or Phil is speaking a code, or there's some silly reason why he declares that the Pentagon pedophile exists and that he is part of the high command. And that some nitwit, either Tim Homestead or somebody else, communicates on the internet using the username High Command. And the only thing that these people are commanding are their fairy tales. But the followers of these people, for whatever reason, don't understand the facts and why it is impossible for what Tim Homestead, Randy Q, and these other people state is true. The government simply does not function that way. They do not use a military organization to fight civilian criminal actions in this manner. Military has specific missions and duties. Now it's the Justice Department that handles these situations. Now, Tim Homestead could have come up with a fictional organization that might have made a hell of a lot more sense, and they might have been able to get away with this simply by changing one word, Pentagon. They could have come up with the Governmental Pedophile Task Force, or any other acronym that took the military out of the equation. But they're stuck, because if they change the organization now, as far as the name and structure, they've screwed themselves. Because then people will understand that they weren't telling the truth. So they're stuck with the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force. And because they're still using the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, they're breaking the law. And eventually the government's going to get tired of it. And the government's going to come knocking on their door and saying that you people are impersonating governmental officials and you are going to jail. You know, Tim Homestead cannot get that through his thick head, that he is breaking the law, and he's breaking a very serious one, just like Kirk Pendergrass and Chris Hallett. They are representing themselves as government contractors or government officials, and that is against the law. So you have the situation where these people are defrauding the public. And the public, for the most part, doesn't seem to care, because they keep supporting these people. And I do not feel sorry for them, because the evidence is there. I mean, the fraud that's being perpetrated by these individuals is so glaringly obvious that these people should be saying, the hell with this. I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to say I sent $100, I sent $500, I sent $5 to these people because they represented themselves as this, that, and the other thing, and it turned out it's a big fraud. And the government would come in and start asking for bank records and, economic reports and disbursement reports and so forth. And it wouldn't be some guy from Canada that's involved somehow directly with the creation of the Children's Crusade. It would be the United States government, or in some cases, the Canadian government, or possibly even Interpol that gets involved in finding out what the hell's going on with these two organizations. And thus this little child's play keeps going on. Because these individuals have begun to falsely believe that the government is simply not interested in them. That the government considers them small potatoes and they're not going to bother them. They're going to leave them alone. That the government's got better things to do than worry about a bunch of hucksters on the internet. But they're wrong. Because they don't understand the amount of money that they are circulating is going to get attention, or has gotten attention. And also the fact that they got mixed up with Cynthia Abchug and were funneling her all over the country using funds that may be tied to the Children's Crusade or the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, and that this could get people into a hell of a lot of trouble, because not only are you breaking the law by harboring someone that has a warrant out for their arrest, but you're also misusing funds. You're creating wire fraud, because you cannot solicit funds to break the law, regardless of what the aim of your organization is. If you paid for a hotel room with funds derived from the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force or the Children's Crusade, you are committing wire fraud. And you're committing money laundering and various other criminal enterprises and acts. And eventually, this is going to catch up, because people are going to start to complain. As more and more people realize that their money has gone down a dark hole, they're going to pull out their credit card receipts or their bank statements, and they're going to go to their law enforcement agency, and they're going to say, hey, I gave these people $5, $10, $100, $500, and this is what they're doing with it. I didn't give them money to sit there and go and have this woman break the law and be charged with kidnapping and all this. I thought they were genuinely doing something legally about children. And that this Pentagon Pedophile Task Force was real. And it turns out it's just one big hoax. This is something else that people haven't registered yet. The Pentagon Pedophile Task Force and the Children's Crusade are essentially the same thing. Both of these organizations are supposed to be fighting pedophiles. They're supposed to be fighting human trafficking, and so on and so forth. Two identical organizations, twins. And these people are involved with both of them. At one point, Randy Erickson was involved not only with the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, she was involved with the Children's Crusade. And the people that are behind these organizations were intermingling the two. That there was no separation. Phil McConnell was responsible for both of them. It's an overlap in bureaucracy. It's an inefficient way of running things to have on one side, a governmental organization that you're involved in this case, the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force, and then you have a civilian organization, which is the Children's Crusade, and you have allegedly Donald J. Trump involved in both of them. I mean, it's a crazy mixed up mess. Things just are not done that way. And so this is another reason why this organization does not exist. It's pure fiction. And yet, every day, there's somebody in support of either one or both of these organizations. That either the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force or the Children's Crusade, there's somebody there saying, oh, you know, this person's a hero, that person's a hero. They're risking their lives, blah, blah, blah. And common sense just flies out the window. And they adjudicate a woman guilty that they have never even heard of, simply on the word of an unemployed pizza delivery driver. And all this nonsense that we go through day in and day out is because of people not using their brain, not using common sense, not understanding that there is a military veteran that is 70 years old sitting in a county jail right now because of the rants of Timothy Charles Holmseth, that it was solely Timothy Charles Holmseth that sold this bill of goods. You know, I don't feel sorry for Field McConnell. I don't excuse Field McConnell. But I do understand that Field McConnell is one of these individuals that is easily led down a dark path because of what he believes in. Field McConnell, for years, has gone down this path of conspiracy theories, largely having to do with the droning of commercial airlines and tying it to 9/11 and the mysterious disappearance of an airplane in an airplane crash in Ukraine or what have you. And this is largely due to his politics and his anger towards his sister, who just happens to be on the Democratic side of the equation. You know, and this is why I say to all those that are believers in MAGA and Trump and so forth, you have to set that all aside. And this even has to do with Q. Set your Q beliefs aside. If you believe in Q, fine. But that's not the issue here, because even Q is beginning to question all this, and those known to be affiliated with Q. And that is that these people are lying. They are committing frauds. They are using the political and other beliefs that you have to defraud you. You know, just because Field McConnell and Tim Holmseth thinks that Trump is the best thing since God doesn't mean that they're on the right side of what they're doing. They are just taking advantage of a belief system. This is the oldest trick in the book. You find somebody that believes what you believe, and you embellish it, and you make it your cause. And then you suck the people in, and this is what's going on. Because people are not willing to use their common sense. They're not willing to admit that they may have been wrong trusting these people. And they pay through their wallet because of it. And by their silence, they are enabling people like Field McConnell and Timothy Holmseth and Chris Hallett and so forth to victimize a new set of people. They make it that much harder to get the situation resolved. Now, I am hoping that Agent Margaritaville keeps on the pressure and that other people keep on the pressure and pressure the various law enforcement agencies and the governments to crack down on these people and to say, finally, enough is enough. Let's deal with this situation and get these people put in jail. Now, one of the things that's going to happen that's eventually going to tip this is when Field McConnell loses in court. Field McConnell stands a very, very good chance of being adjudicated guilty of the criminal actions against him. And because of that, Field McConnell would serve time in jail. He's already been in jail for over 4 months. And this is while Timothy Homseth is enjoying the freedom to travel and do what he pretty well wants to do. He's not having to account for a damn thing. He's not suffering in the least. He is having a good old time out there on everybody's dime because the money has to be coming from someplace. Who is paying for the gas in the car? Who is paying for his food? Who is paying for the hotel rooms or apartment where he's staying? Who is paying for all this stuff? Nobody seems to care. You know, they just look at Timothy Homseth as this big hero that's saving the world from the evils of Hillary Clinton and, you know, Vice President Pence and all these other people, and they don't care how he does it. And in fact, he's not doing a damn thing. He's just running around the country taking pictures under signs and enjoying himself. While Field McConnell sits in a county jail, cut off, no more Bible readings, no more field reports, nothing. And guess what? Today is the start of the Watchman Conference in Texas, and guess who is not there? Field McConnell. Now, I would not be the least bit surprised that Timothy Homseth tries to show up. But I don't know. I don't know if they'd welcome Timothy Homseth at this point. Because I think deep down, Denise McConnell and some of these other people realize that it's Timothy Homseth responsible for this mess. That they were doing perfectly fine until Tim Homseth came into the picture. You know, we're talking about less than a year. The summer of 2019, and we're in the winter of 2020. So we're not even a year into the meeting of these two gentlemen, and look where Field McConnell is. It only took from the time Tim Homseth met Field McConnell until the actions were against him a couple of months. You know, look at the dates. Look at when Tim Homseth met formally Field McConnell. I believe it was in July of 2019. And so we're talking August, September. And all of a sudden, the legal action starts against Field McConnell. Less than a couple of months. Right around 2, 3 on the outside. October, he gets served formally with the order for protection. Within 5 minutes, he disregards it. A month later, he gets arrested and put in jail. So we're talking about November. 5 months, 6 months at the outside is all it took for Timothy Charles Homseth to ruin Field McConnell. How long before this had Field McConnell been doing what he was doing, and the only thing he might be getting is somebody like Monograph questioning his actions, but not really getting very far in doing anything about it. Field McConnell was pedaling along, doing what he does every day, doing his webcasts out of his studio or wherever it was that he wore the pink underwear and the silly little wig and dancing around and entertaining people. And then out of the blue comes Timothy Charles Homseth. And look what happens within a very short period of time. Less than a year. It all falls apart. He gets involved in Cynthia Abzug. She goes on a national radio webcast and basically accuses Field McConnell of breaking the law. Again, because of Tim Homseth, partially, and his handlers, and blames them for possibly losing her children. And now she has to fight with CPS. She declares that she's working with the federal government as a witness and that she may implicate both Field McConnell and Tim Homseth along with Sarah Dunklin and some other people in criminal actions. So we have all this going on. And all these people looking down the barrel of justice. And Timothy Charles Holmes is running around the country sightseeing. And people that support both of these individuals don't seem to comprehend this. They don't care. But they will care. Because eventually, this is all going to come out. The truth has a way of coming out. It sometimes takes a little bit of time, but it comes out. And then I'll be right there to say, see, I told you so. So, until later, this is William K. Murtaugh, Witness 1. Have a good one.